Cause you feel the chaos waking, running out of time. But this world is ours to save, so hold the high. Oh, it's do or die. Oh, now it's our only chance. And if we're going down, we're going down fighting. Like it's the end of the like it's the end of the sleep when you're dead. Cause we've come too far to waste it, hanging by a thread. Time to rise, we cannot break, so hold the high. Oh, it's do or die. Oh, now it's our only chance. And if we're going down, we're going down fighting. Gotta hold our ground. Oh, this is our last stand. And if we're going down, we're going down fighting. Like it's the end of the like it's the end of the like it's the end of the like it's the end of the
Greetings, Watch Coppers. Welcome back to Disenthrall. I will be Patrick Smith. Today we have a really cool show where we're co-streaming to both my channel, Disenthrall, as well as James Freeman's channel. So there's two audiences in one chat. It's kind of hot. I want you guys to kiss and make friends. Welcome to the show. Welcome. I guess I'm welcoming you to your own show, James. Good to see you.
Yeah, but you're hosting, just restreaming to mine, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we also have special guests that I will allow you to introduce, James.
Yeah, so we have Zach Cook, New Mexico attorney and former state representative in New Mexico. And Zach, maybe we can have Zach do a little bit of self-introduction, but I'll tell you how Zach and I met each other. We've kind of been working together on a lot of First Amendment and free speech stuff. And it's becoming a lot more accepted and common, this whole auditing and cop watching thing that's going on. People are starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, these anarchists are right. Not necessarily really
I
anarchists.
just realized I'm like sniffing your head. I don't like this position. This is weird.
No, leave it there.
Okay. Oh man, no. So we've done one of these three-way shows previously, and I thought it was going to be like a one-off. But man, what if this became a thing where we just have like the moral philosophy, the legal analysis, and then whatever you do, James? I don't know, but it's
Just be
really
a smart ass and throw it off the rails.
It's really fun. Like we got to try and make this a thing that we do more often. But what are we talking about today?
So there's been a lot of stuff going on all over. This movement is kind of growing. The liberty movement as a whole, the movement for First Amendment rights, all of this. So I've been working with Zach quite a bit recently. He helped us out in Mountain Air, as a matter of fact. And I've actually gone with him and done First Amendment classes for municipalities that he's an attorney for, and tried to teach them, hey, this is how you don't go viral on YouTube and don't get the living crap sued out of you. And trying to genuinely give them the tools instead of having them taught by people who really hate freedom, you know? And so we've been collabing, working a lot together. And recently we went out to Gallup, New Mexico, and there was a guy who was arrested multiple times for cussing at police and giving them the finger. And so we set this thing up where we, some guys out of Arizona rented an RV. 10 or 15 of us showed up and converged on this place, got out to protest, and just started yelling and screaming vulgarities. Not necessarily because we wanted to, but because they said we couldn't. And when folks like me are told that we cannot do something, we go out of our way to do it. After this event in Gallup, New Mexico, there's a failed activist that sent an email to the mayor saying, hey, James Freeman and these guys never even had a legal right to be in your building. And he listed all of this case law and mumbo jumbo and told them, hey, you can make an administrative order that you can just kick these guys out of your building, and that's that. And then all you have to do is get guns and force it on people. And so he's been sending this notice to a lot of different municipalities. He sent it to Gallup, though, and I sent it to Zach, who's an attorney in New Mexico, who glanced over it and within minutes called me back and said, this is absolute trash. This is so easy to destroy from a legal perspective. And I said, excellent, let's do it. And here we are.
Oh, cool. This will be exciting then. All right. So we have some magic spells that we're going to debunk, and we have our wizard here with us that's hopefully going to take it down from a magic perspective. I'm sorry. I call it magic spells because it's kind of a made up system of rules that doesn't really that isn't real. It's not in reality. It's just a system that people have constructed to try and solve disputes. But over time, it's become more decrepit and less functional and more polluted and perverted. As all things that aren't real can be. Like if they're under control of people, then they're going to be, captured and perverted towards the ends of power and money. So that's why I call it magic spells. And it's not an insult to call you a wizard. Like, we need people that know how these systems work so that, we have some modicum of agency to fight back against them in their own spellcasting arenas, let's say. But yeah, welcome to the show, Zach. It's good to have you. Can you tell us about yourself?
Oh, thank you. It's good. Sure. Like James said, I'm a lawyer in New Mexico. I've been practicing law since 2004. I live in a small town in New Mexico, southern New Mexico, and I represent 2 municipalities and what's called a quasi-municipal entity. It's the solid waste company here in my county that's made up of the municipalities and the county, and they just take care of the solid waste, but it operates like a municipality does. So I've been representing municipalities ever since I started practicing law. And in 2009, I was appointed to the legislature. My state representative won the election in 2008, but then he got sick and his wife got sick, so he had to resign. And I was appointed by the governor at that point and ran 6 more times. So I was in the legislature for 14 years. Last year was my last year, and I chose not to run because of many factors, including what I saw during COVID and what I learned in life, and that did not play out as I would have expected. I was very disappointed in my government and the judiciary and the handling of it, and the executive and the legislative, all 3 branches. It was very disturbing to watch. So I decided I did not want to have a part in that. Of course, there are family considerations too. I have 2 young kids, and it's hard for them, and my wife to go up to Santa Fe at this point and spend 60 days a year. So that was that consideration as well. But mostly it was just a complete, turnaround in my thinking, and just this whole life isn't necessarily the way it is.
I really needed to have this conversation right now because, James, I was talking to a friend of mine and I said this on Anarcast yesterday. Like, I'm so far past black pilled right now. Like, I call myself void pilled. Like, I'm just so doom and gloom about everything. And I've been telling people that, like, COVID has, like, one of the silver linings is that the whole COVID tyranny has really woken some people up. And so I guess I really need to hear your story, Zach, because I need you to give me some hope that some people are waking up from this. And and especially as an insider in the legislature, like your story's got to be pretty interesting. So I hope that, I don't know if we're supposed to talk about that today, but I hope if we don't talk about it today, you have an invitation to another conversation with me. But yeah,
Anytime you want.
James, what are we doing here? We're going to talk about that letter that was sent and break it down, or what's the goal?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I'll just kind of intro it a little bit from my perspective, and then Zach, we can have you go into, I guess, debunking what this guy says the law is or how it's applied, I suppose.
Do you have the letter?
I'm not the lawyer.
Can you send it to me? I'll throw it up on the screen or something. I don't know if that's helpful. If it is, let me know.
I should have done that before the show, right, Patrick?
Oh, that's all good. If not, that's fine. Whatever. Dude, I over prepare for these things. I nag the shit out of you. For 2 days, I was probably bothering him.
Yeah, but all you were asking me for was a picture and a link. That was it. It just took 2 days to get that out of me.
It's all good. Oh, man. Anyway, I mean, if you have it handy, you can send it to me. If not, that's fine. We can just go. Or you could start.
Do we have it handy where we can just forward it to him? And you know what? I can forward it to you in an email probably. And then in the meantime, I guess Zach, you can just go ahead and do we need it up on the screen actually, Zach?
I don't think so.
Or can you? Okay, you can take off with it without. Then go ahead and just take off with what this guy had claimed and start debunking it. In the meantime, I'll get an email over to Patrick. So in a few minutes we can get it up on screen.
So this was in response to what
Okay.
all of you guys did. You in that state, you went to this courthouse or whatever, and you pissed a bunch of people off by yelling profanities. And then, who was this that sent the letter? Maybe start there and set it up for us.
No. We won't start there. We don't want to give him any clout. A lot of these people do these things knowing that they're wrong, simply because they want attention. So I don't believe in saying the name of the school shooter or different terrorist organizations, and I don't feel like giving this guy any credit or clout or attention that he wants either. So we will not talk about him. We will only talk about the actual topic, not debunking him, but debunking his claims, I suppose.
Okay, kick ass. Take it away, Zach.
Okay, so as James just described, he called me a week or 10 days ago and told me about this letter. I guess he had been copied on it on an email to the mayor of Gallup, and I said, well, let me send it over to me. I'd love to see it, because I guys like you go out and try to research the law, or do research the law, sit down and read it, and then interpret it. Can y'all hear me?
It's cutting in and out.
Patrick?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can't hear
right.
Patrick. I don't know if he's muted.
Can you make sure all of your other browser tabs are closed? I think we're having some connection issues, Zach. Just make sure that you have nothing else open or going on your computer. That would probably help us. It's popping in and out. And I will reduce the stream quality a little bit here to you guys to hopefully help this. All right, cool. We'll see if that works, guys.
Patrick,
What's up?
Patrick, what's an email I can forward this to you at?
Patrick at disenthrall.me. That's a secret. No one else heard that, right?
No, nope.
Cool.
Hundreds of people did not hear that.
Cool. All right. I think he's refreshing.
Patrick
hopefully he'll be back.
Okay. Patrick at disenthrall.me.
Yes.
2 L's. There it is.
Yeah.
All right.
Go.
So
I'll
I'm
unmute,
forwarding you the
I'll
original
unmute my
email.
mic now that we've talked about that. So.
All right. So I just forwarded you the email that has the brief.
Okay, cool.
Attached.
Got it. Stout. Oh, I'm not supposed to say this stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just the name of the law firm is kind of dumb.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I think when Zach gets back and starts really picking it apart, you'll see that that's the least dumb thing.
19 pages. Okay.
I don't know how much of it exactly he'll go over either, but I think there's...
All right. Looks like he's logging back in now. We'll see.
Felipe Hemming says it's not a law firm, it's a pro se moron. And I'm not against fighting against the government pro se, because I think that I've seen personally that a lot of them winning is, for example, in Arizona, I was arrested and slapped with 4 federal charges for recording on a public sidewalk. I beat all of the charges. In other words, they were all dismissed after 2.5 years, but I spent over $15,000 on lawyers and my time and money and effort. And so that is the punishment. People are like, "Oh, James, you won." I'm like, "No, I assure you, as soon as the handcuffs go on, you lost."
No one wins. All right, cool.
So I'm not against people fighting the government themselves, but this guy really is.
Welcome
he's
back,
not even
Zach.
trying to fight the government. Sorry, go ahead.
Hey,
All right, let me just see if I can get this thing thrown together here. Nice. We have the document now.
Did we lose him again?
No, he's still here.
no,
Oh, okay.
He just muted his camera, I think.
Oh, that'll probably help the stream though. Just audio, right?
I could put the document over his face. I'm trying to hide my own face, though. It should up the stream numbers. What's up, y'all? This is crazy. James, your audience is fucking hilarious.
I love them.
Oh,
And
man.
I don't have any mods either, so you do have to be a little bit careful about YouTube will automatically withhold certain comments, make them too filthy. So if you're going to make filthy comments, you need to misspell your words so that YouTube doesn't catch it. But yep, 700 people in the chat with no moderators.
It's crazy. It's scrolling so fast I don't even see it. This is nuts, dude. I'm not used to your level of clout, my friend. It's kind of insane.
And it's pure anarchy in there, just pure anarchy.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Like somebody I was seeing the chat before the show started. Somebody was talking about selling Cop Watcher pee on your OnlyFans, and I was like, God, you haven't told me you have an OnlyFans?
Yep. And then I sell piss on there.
God, man. Like, why haven't I thought of doing that? I don't know. How you doing, Mark? I
Zach.
think you're there. Or Zach, sorry.
yeah, y'all there? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
You ready?
Yep.
So we got
Okay.
the document up on screen now too, so we can go forward now.
Yep.
Oh, okay. So James forwarded this to me, and I opened it up, and it looks, pretty official. Looks like he has read some legal pleadings before, because he kind of copied, the way lawyers write a memorandum until you dig through it, and there's a lot of flaws in his legal reasoning. So just starting at the beginning, he says he just definitively states that there are 4 different types of, he says public, but what he means to say is of fora. So there are different types of places that the courts have described in cases over the years, 4 different types of public fora. There's the open or the public forum that's a pure public forum, the streets, the town square, things like that. Limited public forum where people have a right to exercise the First Amendment right, but not necessarily as much as in a full public forum. Then there's a designated public forum, like if the local government has a particular building and they allow like theater performances or talks of whatever type. and then there's a non-public forum where you're just restricted from exercising your right. So he does a decent job, I guess, describing those. It's really not that relevant. It's like he's just trying to like develop his street cred that he knows what he's talking about. But
I'm especially amused by this one called non-public. So there's non-public public property. That's government logic right there. That's interesting.
Right. And he's confused about the terminology in general because he keeps referring to public, but it's not 4 different types of public. It's 4 different types of places where the public can exercise their First Amendment right. Forum, as it's called. So look at the title, though. This is what's shocking from the get-go. Memorandum in support of limited public forums and in support of arrest and prosecution of AI frauditors. He's clearly had his feelings hurt. Yeah. Support of arrest and prosecution of A1 frauditors.
Frauditors. I've never heard that before. Is that a thing that people say? Is that what they call you? James?
I mean, yeah, it's been going around for a while, and I mean, I started using it the other day when I was in a Discord chat with somebody just because it was catchy. I was like, oh, okay. So me and these other frauditors, and
wow.
I mean,
right on. Okay.
I was just shocked that some, random person out there is writing to local governments in support of arresting people for exercising their First Amendment.
So this is not a government person. This is like nobody special or linked to any of this. It's just a person.
So this guy actually, I know we don't want to say who he is. People are all over the chat saying who it is, though, because it's an anarchy chat. But he is a failed First Amendment auditor. He got himself, from what I understand, I haven't looked into it, but I believe that he ended up getting and lost a case, and so he came back and said, "Oh no, this doesn't work."
He's a frauditor?
You don't really.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was former. Okay. He formally went out and did it himself, but it appears that he lost a few times, and which is, the nature of it when you really understand what's going on. There's rules, there's codes, there's statutes, but the government doesn't even obey their own rules. And that is the most important point, is that it doesn't, it is genuinely really good to know as much as we can about their magic spells, I think. It really is. But it's also important to realize that they will not obey their own rules. And really, this is a system of the guy with the biggest stick wins, and they got the biggest stick. He got his ass beat, apparently, and now he's butt hurt and wants everyone else to get their ass beat.
Okay.
And so I don't know if I made it clear what shocked me about that. Yeah, I guess I did. That some random guy is writing local government officials asking them to arrest people for executing their rights, or at least raising the issue in the public square about whether or not they can exercise their First Amendment right there. It's just kind of off-putting, I guess, to me, advocate of free speech. So then, the second paragraph.
There's something there about redressing our grievances or something. That's supposed to be important, right?
Something in there about that.
Sorry, go ahead.
So
I'm gonna interrupt you relentlessly. I apologize in advance.
That's
Please
right.
continue.
Individuals have a First Amendment right to film from traditional public places. Okay, so he just makes a definitive statement. You have a First Amendment right to exercise your First Amendment in traditional public places. And then he goes on to say individuals do not have a right to film in limited places. But so he declares that everybody has an unlimited right in traditional public places. And then later on in his brief, he goes on to describe 3 cases where that proved not to be true, where the court ruled in favor of a restriction in traditional public places. So it's just, the point is that his logic's off. It doesn't matter. He's not a lawyer. I'm not going to hold him to some standard that he's supposed to nail it on everything, on every point. And then, like I said, he goes in at length describing, how the courts have described the different types of public fora.
I'm curious about the magic spells on that. What are the 4 different types? Can you describe them?
Yeah, so there's a pure public forum, which is like the town square, the traditional town square, where generally speaking, everybody has a right to be heard out there, on the streets, on the sidewalks, places like that. limited public fora would probably be like perhaps City Hall, which we'll get to that point here in a little bit. Like if you go in to pay your water bill or something, do you really, or what a better example is what happened in Gallup. Do you really have a right to do that? And we'll talk more about the details of that. Is inside of Village Hall or a municipal court really a pure public forum? That's kind of why I wanted to have this conversation, because I don't want you guys, I want you to be, I want y'all to be more informed about how a court's going to analyze it before you storm the castle next time.
Cool. All right.
And okay, so then there's that's limited. Then there's a designated. So like if the town has a building, they can allow theater performances or talks or whatever. But they decide who gets to go in there, and it's not black and white on that either. Because if they allow some religious group to talk and then they don't allow the next one. We all are familiar with that fact.
What's an example of that? Like I'm guessing like a public college's auditorium would be an example of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be. And then a non-public forum is where, like a military base where the public may be allowed or not allowed. There's actually one of the big cases is from is off of a military base, and they ruled that it was not a traditional public forum. I can't say whether or not, if they really defined it as a non-public forum, but someplace like high security risk, you don't just get to march around and do and say whatever you want to do and say. And in fact, you may be restricted to just go in and enter and not exercise any expressive, communication, verbal or your conduct. As conduct has been described as the courts as First Amendment speech as well, or expression. So anyways, it gets interesting at about page 17 when he starts saying what frauditors know and believe. And James, just correct me if I'm wrong. You've never been deposed on what you know or think or believe about public fora and where you can and cannot exercise your First Amendment right, have you?
Ever been deposed on it? No. As a matter of fact, I've never even been deposed at all. Even in civil lawsuits that I've had against government, I've always managed to not get deposed.
Yeah. And my point is, he says A1 First Amendment auditors do not know or believe that there are 4 different publics. Again, 4 different fora. Nor do they know or believe in the difference between the 4 quote unquote publics.
And I think that may be somewhat accurate for a lot of people, right, Zach? That may be somewhat accurate, that a lot of people genuinely don't know the difference. They don't know that there's different forms, nor do they know what those different forms are. He may even be a little accurate in that.
But he doesn't know what you know or what you don't know or what you believe or what you don't believe. Because, I mean, this was specifically sent to Gallup.
And he's collectivizing all of you. Like, he's declaring this group of people called fraudsters and then asserting what they know and don't know. It's hilarious.
Mm-hmm. And then he goes on, therefore, A1 auditors and their fellow YouTube followers, wait a minute. Okay, A1 frauditors believe anything that is funded by tax dollars is a traditional public place, and that therefore A1 frauditors and their fellow YouTubers can co-manage the affairs of that place with the government. Now, I've only been watching y'all's videos for 2 months maybe, but I never got the feeling that y'all were trying to co-manage anything. Did you ever go into City Hall trying to co-manage the government?
Absolutely, positively not. I will 100% deny that. That is false.
Right. And then turn the page. A1 frauditors do not know or believe that the First Amendment right to freedom of the press, one, does not exist. So the freedom of, you guys don't know that the freedom of press does not exist, presumably because you read the First Amendment and it expressly says that the right to free press does exist. And then he connects it with, he goes on and says, and may be restricted. So it doesn't exist, but the state can restrict it. You know,
I'm
that's what I'm
confused
talking
now.
about. The legal. He's not real sharp on the legal reasoning. I'm picking apart the reasoning, just looking at it as a lawyer and where you would, raise some questions. We'll get to the legal aspects of it later because that's the most important part. Because like I said, I want you guys and your followers to think about it in a different way and do a public fora analysis before you
Go running in.
exercise your right. Yeah, go running in, right.
Interesting. This is
Guns
fun.
blazing, wieners hanging out.
I'm taking notes. I'm
There's
saving
no
up.
First Amendment.
I'm saving up the guns. I'm taking notes. Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, this is a good one. A1 frauditor dogma can be used against A1 frauditors to devastating effect because, and then he cites Sheets versus City of Punta Gorda, I guess that's in Florida, has already shattered and decrypted every generic frauditor script available to frauditors. Do you guys know, are y'all familiar with the Sheets v. City of Punta Gorda case?
No.
You actually sent it to me, and I read I read most of it, and I decided that, to me personally, as a layman, he was arguing the wrong points in Sheets. I think one of his arguments was that so the Punta Gorda made an ordinance, I believe, or an administrative order saying that you can't record inside of the city hall, I believe. And if you do, then it's punishable by, I think, being trespassed for up to a year, maybe. Is that right?
I can't remember what, yeah.
But what he was arguing, if I'm not mistaken, is that it was only unconstitutional because the punishment was too long, or something like that. I didn't feel like he was arguing his right to actually record in the public place. I don't think that, to me, I don't think that, as a layman, as a dumb guy, I don't think that argument was made in the proceedings.
Yeah, and I recall you and I were texting about it, and I skimmed through it, and I think you told me about that the same day in the same phone conversation that you told me about. It was right around Christmas, and so I said, send me the memo. But then I went and tracked down that City of Punta Gorda case and read it and thought, oh wow, okay, we need to talk about this. And then I started digging into it more. And let me explain also that all my career as a lawyer, I've been on the government side of things. I've never been a quote unquote constitutional lawyer. I did quite a bit of litigation representing small businesses in New Mexico that were getting shut down and fined $5,000 a day during that debacle. And so, I mean, to whatever extent that makes me a constitutional lawyer, then maybe I am. But I mean, I am a lawyer, and I know how to read the cases and figure it out pretty quickly. And so that Sheets v. Punta Gorda case did concern me, and I wanted to get in touch with James. I wanted to talk with him about it, so you guys can talk to so that your audience can know about the red flags or the pitfalls that there are out there. That it's not just black and white. But the point that I made, why I keep talking about Punta Gorda, is that he's citing as a definitive legal answer to the question of whether or not you can film in a government building. He's citing a case from a district court in Florida, a federal district court in Florida. And the way courts work, in the federal system, you've got your district courts that are spread out all over. All the states are divided into different districts. And then if you lose there, you can appeal it to the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, which in my case, I'm in the 10th Federal Circuit, which is New Mexico, Colorado. I can't even think of all the states because I don't practice in federal court. But the circuit court for the 10th is located in Denver. So you take your case to the 10th Circuit Court, and then it's not until an appellate court makes a ruling that it's binding law. So he's saying to the people in Gallup, New Mexico, that some district court judge in the Middle District of Florida made this ruling, and now the entire country and all of you frauditors are bound by this law. And so the police in Gallup should go arrest you because of what a judge in Florida, in whatever circuit that is, decided that Punta Gorda's ordinance or whatever it was a valid ordinance and a valid restriction of this guy's First Amendment rights. That's not the way it works. In each circuit, when a circuit court of appeals makes a ruling, it's binding on the courts in that circuit. But even the Ninth Circuit, which is Arizona, which is right next door of us, the New Mexico federal courts and the Colorado federal courts and all the other 10th Circuit or any other court outside of the Ninth is not bound by that. It's persuasive, but it's not binding law. Does that make sense? So if I'm a lawyer and I know that Punta Gorda, Colorado, if I'm a prosecutor in the 10th Circuit and I prosecute somebody for violating an ordinance about filming in public, I can go to the court and say, hey, look, you're not the first judge making this call. There was a judge over in Punta Gorda, Florida, or in the Middle District of Florida that ruled on basically the exact same facts, and they decided that this ordinance was valid. And since they did, you should probably do that too. As opposed to if the 10th Circuit said you can restrict it, then I come and my posture is completely different. I say, Judge, District Court Judge, the 10th Circuit has ruled on this, and it is binding on all courts in the 10th Circuit. Am I making sense?
Yeah. Basically,
Okay.
that this case law isn't binding at all. Honestly, anywhere, because it's from a district court too. It's not even from a circuit court, right? So it's really not binding
That's
anywhere.
correct.
Right.
Somebody, whatever circuit this is, if let's say that Florida is in the same circuit with Georgia, and then a similar fact pattern comes up in a case in Georgia, they can still go in there and say, well, Judge blah, blah, blah in the Middle District of Florida ruled this way, and you should too, but it's not Judge blah, blah, blah ruled on this way on this exact same fact pattern, and you're bound by his ruling. So if Mr. Sheets was not happy with the outcome at the Middle District of Florida, he could have taken it to the circuit court, wherever that is, and whatever ruling they issued would be binding at that point. He would still be able to go to the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, and say, would you please review this? Whether or not they would is debatable, or it's just unknown. But I think at the point where we are in a society with what y'all are doing, I think, and what I want to talk about is that there is no Supreme Court case law on this issue right now. He is basically, if there was a Supreme Court case that said you cannot film, if there is an ordinance that prevents you from filming or otherwise exercising your First Amendment right in say, City Hall, if the Supreme Court, if and when the Supreme Court says, yes, those are valid ordinances, depending on how they're written, then it's binding on the entire country, and you guys are in trouble. Well, I mean, just depending on what the ordinances are. And what I'm trying to allude to is that these types of cases are extremely fact specific and case by case. There's no, he wants it to be a completely black and white issue. This court in the Middle District of Florida made this ruling, therefore James Freeman needs to be arrested. It's just absolutely absurd.
Let me interrupt briefly.
The final authority on these, yep.
Yeah, sorry. Let me interrupt briefly just to handle some housekeeping, because I see some super chats going over to James Freeman's channel. Those are not going to show up here in our list because I'm streaming it from my dashboard here, which is not fully wired into his. If you'd like your super chats to show up here, you need to use the super chat link that I pinned in the chat of the video, of which we've received 2. So just to be clear, if you super chat through YouTube on James Freeman's channel, James Freeman gets the money. If you super chat through the link in the chat, I get the money. I have 2 here. Flex Your Freedom says, read this if you're a nerd. I'm a nerd. I would have read it even if you didn't super chat. And Otto says, bad cops are poop, question mark? Yes. And I challenge you to show me a good one. So let's see. Oh, we had a couple more. Thank you for the super chat over on Odysee. We've got a secret little private audience watching on the stream on Odysee. It's good to see you guys. All right. Sorry for all the interruptions. I just wanted to make sure people knew where their money was going for the super chats, because that would be important to me if I was a viewer. All right, please continue.
I think
so.
So
Sheets v. Punta Gorda should be. So Sheets v. Punta Gorda should be appealed as well, right? I mean,
well, I'm sure the time. Yeah, I mean, this is a 2019 case, so he's
out of time.
I would assume they've missed their opportunity unless there's something out there. But as far as I know, I would imagine that the appeals have been. I mean, it's over now.
I mean, at least if you believe in government, at least for those who believe in government and believe in trying to change a system that really is completely dysfunctional and in the first place, then that would be the next step, would be to appeal it, but it's too late for that.
And so what I've been describing is commonly referred to as the hierarchy of courts. You got your district court at the lowest level. That's the trial court level. That's where they'll have a jury or a judge, and they'll call witnesses and, enter evidence. I move Exhibit 1 into evidence, Your Honor. Okay, it's admitted. All the stuff, the TV law stuff. At the appellate level, generally speaking, there are no trials. They just review the record. And so you got your district court, the trial court it's also called. You appeal it. The first level of appeal is the Court of Appeals. The last, the end of the line is the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court does not have to take every single case that they're asked to take. The Constitution says they're a court of original jurisdiction on certain matters, but if something like this were coming up the system, they could easily say no, we're not going to hear it. At which point, the 10th Circuit or whatever the circuit court is that ruled on it, it's over. That's binding, but just in that circuit. So not to beat a dead horse, I wanted to go back and talk about he raises an issue accidentally about he says that if your local government passes an ordinance or regulation or rule or whatever that restricting First Amendment rights, then it's always anytime anybody violates it, then they can be charged with whatever crime it is alleged to or written into the ordinance to. Let's say filming. Town of so and so has passed an ordinance that makes it illegal to film in City Hall. So he says, as long as that ordinance is good, I mean, it hasn't been repealed or anything, then anytime somebody comes in with the camera. What he misses is, and this is important, this goes to Gallup, is you've got policy and you've got practice. So if the policy is under an ordinance or whatever rule, the governing body of the city makes it the policy of the city that you can't film in City Hall, but then they develop a pattern of allowing filming in, and then so for months or years after they pass that law, James Freeman and his crew come in and start filming, and they shut down James and his crew. They're going to have a very good defense that the policy may be there, but the practice has been to allow people to exercise their First Amendment right there. And now all of a sudden you don't like James Freeman and his posse, so you're going to shut him down. That could potentially be a good defense for him. I'm not saying it would work automatic, but again, these things are so fact intensive that everything is going to need to be reviewed by a court. So it's not black and white. Yeah, we can film here, or no, we can't film here, and we have to be arrested. It's all going to come down to the facts of any particular case. And then he goes on to speculate more about what you believe. You guys have any questions?
So one of the things that stood out to me is that he claimed that any city, according to the magic spells, according to, if you believe in these systems in the first place and being robbed at gunpoint and having it called taxation so that they can build these buildings and hire these people to control us and tell us we have to cut our grass. If you believe in all this, then under this system, is it even legitimate? He claims that they can simply make an administrative order saying that there's no recording allowed inside of the public building. And by this, I'm talking like public lobby. We're not even talking about going into offices or stuff like that. And we're not even talking about a full expression of free speech. We're not talking about going into a lobby with a megaphone and a bunch of picket signs and yelling "fuck the police" over the megaphone. We're talking about simply going into the building. And while, for example, one of the things I do is when I get public records, I like to fully document everything I'm doing, whether I'm holding up a camera in my hand or whether I've got a body camera on. And I think that is incredibly important to be allowed to do that. Is it legitimate in any way for them to be able to make a administrative order and say, no, you can't do that. You can't record us? And is that a definitive yes or no? They can or can't do that? Or is it undecided at this point?
It's undecided at this point. And I think you're describing an administrative order that in my mind means that, like, So the city manager gets together and develops this administrative order and then puts it in place. Like in the towns I represent, you got a village manager who does things like that, just for like internal policies. I don't think that would be, I don't think the village manager can restrict your First Amendment right on his own. But if they said, hey, they called me and say, hey, Zach, write an ordinance that says you can't film here. Obviously, we'd have a long conversation, and I would, talk to them about all the stuff we're talking about. But just say it was 3 years ago when they came to me. I said, oh, well, yeah, sure, I'll write that for you. And then, what is that?
This is just something that came to mind. A couple of years ago, I was going to Mexico, and I didn't have a passport that was current. It had expired. And we did a thing where we went to get our passports wearing slave costumes to make the point that we had to beg master's permission for the privilege of being able to travel to another plantation. And when we were in one of the post offices working on getting this, they came out, and this was... I don't do this First Amendment auditing stuff like this. Not that I have anything against it. It's just not what I've been up to. But this time we had cameras in a post office. This guy comes out and he tells us that we're not allowed to film in there. And I was kind of taken aback. I didn't know what to say. I was like, well, obviously this is a public place. You don't have an expectation of privacy. And I'm trying to quote magic spells that I know that I don't even believe in. But so what I just heard you say is that it's not clear whether I had the right to do that. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true. So what our friend here who wrote the brief is hanging his hat on to a certain degree is that there have been challenges up to the Court of Appeals up to the Court of Appeals in several circuits. I don't know if it's the majority of circuits. James, you might know that. But it is very clear that in whatever circuits have ruled, including my circuit, the 10th, which just ruled literally just a few weeks ago in November, that people do have a right to film the police out on the streets while they're doing their job. And how that case came about is some guys started filming a DWI arrest. They were doing the sobriety test on this guy. And this one cop, I can't remember the town, suburban Denver, I think, a cop comes up angry that they're filming, and the cop shines his flashlight in some of the cop watcher's eyes. He gets in his car, he blows his horn at him, and then, not only that, he slams the accelerator down and hauls ass right at him, turns around, goes back, does it again, and then I think they get arrested. Makes it to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals says they absolutely had a right to film those police under those circumstances out on the street. Now, does that, and this is what y'all need to think about, that was one fact pattern, right? How do you apply that to you guys, say, going into, if it was City Hall or I think it was a municipal court in Gallup or whatever, and doing what you did at a place that's walled off, and there are people in there who aren't police officers? I don't think it matters. I don't think that necessarily matters, who are doing administrative work behind glass, and then you guys come in, disrupting the place, filming, using profanity, whatever. Does that automatically, the reasoning that the court used to say they do have the First Amendment right to film the police on the street, does that reasoning automatically apply to the facts of what y'all were doing at the municipal court in Gallup? I don't know. And no court has ruled on it yet.
Right. So it's not even necessarily that this, because it was assumed for years, probably close to at least a decade. Somebody go ahead and correct me if you're wrong, but I think a lot of us have assumed for at least the last 5 or 10 years that we do have a right to record police out in public on a public sidewalk. But it wasn't decided by a court. It hadn't been argued in a court before, and so we can make assumptions on whether or not how the courts would rule about us recording in a public lobby. And again, I think it will come down to every single specific circumstance. For example, if I go into this public lobby with a bunch of my buddies with a megaphone and some picket signs and start yelling so loud that anybody else who's trying to come up to the window cannot conduct their business in there, with the mafia, I think that the court would likely say, no, you don't have a right to do that. Now, on the other hand, I think if I walk in there and I have a body camera on and I'm picking up public records and that's all I'm doing, and they arrest me for that, I strongly believe that a court would say, no, this slave has the right to document his masters while he's getting his public records from them. And so it's not that you don't necessarily have the right, it's that it really hasn't been established by a court, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
that's right.
And now we've got, I think it's almost every circuit has ruled on the right to record police now in the U.S. Not even all of them have done it though yet. And so I think that the next step is to push towards getting rulings in all of these circuit courts on recording inside of the building. And that is going to end up being most likely a limited public forum, right, Zach? There's going to be things that the government will likely say, yes, you can restrict this particular free speech activity, such as maybe getting a megaphone and yelling, fuck the police, while some lady is in there trying to do business. But there's going to have to be a reason behind each restriction, right? That it's the government has to establish it. No, that we're doing this for a specific reason, and it's not to violate free speech. It's so that business can be conducted without being disrupted, right?
Right, but think about this, James. You laid out a lot of the facts that would be very important, but you missed a very important one, and that is when the police officer stuck his head outside of the door, tried to get y'all to leave. You told him to shut his effing mouth when he's talking to you, and he turned around and walked off.
Oh, I really want that clip.
Allowing you to continue what you were doing.
I want that clip.
I mean, don't you think that would be an important fact for a court to analyze if you had been arrested that day?
Yeah, I think it would. Yeah, absolutely. And man, I think that a court and a jury, a lot of times when I do things, I have to wonder, how would a jury see this? And for the most part, when you're telling a cop to shut his mouth when he's talking to you, I think most juries will look at that and go, "Ooh, this guy's an asshole." Yeah. And juries often will convict or choose not to convict based on feelings rather than facts of law. So yeah,
which is another reason we have
everything. Go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
I was just saying that, which is another reason we have courts of appeals, because juries can get it wrong. District court judges can get it wrong. So you want to take it to the court of appeals. Of course, they can get it wrong as well. But, we need it to go to a appellate court level and get a ruling on it.
I think I found it.
Encourage you to be the test case on that. But
when I tell you to do something, you shut your mouth when you do it. You shut your mouth when you're talking to me. All right? You shut your mouth when you're talking to me. Okay? You understand me, son? We're busy right now.
You shut your mouth when you're talking to me. Oh, it's so funny. Oh my God, I laughed.
And then he turned around and shut the door.
What?
Go ahead, Zach.
And then he turned around and shut the door. So what I was saying earlier, there's policy and there's practice. If there's a policy that says you can't do that, and then he comes out and scolds you for it and then turns around and walks away and you continue doing it, I mean, one single time isn't going to establish that there's a policy of allowing that, but I think you get the point that if they continue to allow it over and over again, you start. I think
they'd be in big trouble if they didn't allow it, because he came out to let us know that we could not actually use the megaphone in the building, because right before that, Direct D took the megaphone and goes, "Hey, can we use this in the building?" And it was absolutely hilarious. But that's when he opens the door and says, "No, you cannot." But once that behavior stopped, I think that they would have I think they would have a very difficult time arguing in court. We need to restrict their First Amendment rights unless our First Amendment rights are infringing on their ability to conduct business. So once we had essentially quieted down once he came out, right? Mm-hmm. And so had they started rounding us up and arresting us, I think that it would have been some Leon Valley stuff, another massive lawsuit with a lot of plaintiffs. And I think that we would have won it. I think the only argument they possibly could have made is that you can't use the megaphone. But even still, we were the only ones in the building there to conduct there was no one in there to conduct business while any of this took place either, right? And I think every single factor is important. The scenario could have changed instantly if some mother walked in with her 3-year-old daughter. I think it could have changed instantly and could have changed a ruling on whether what we did was okay or not.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if Gallup has an actual ordinance that says you can't do what you guys were doing. But this guy who wrote the brief and wrote the letter to the mayor saying that he needs to go arrest you guys, just based on Sheets versus Punta Gorda, you can't just arrest people because of what they're doing. They have to be violating some, as you guys call it, spell.
Yes, magic spell. Yes.
Okay.
Codes,
just catching up.
codes and statutes.
Okay.
That's funny.
So they
The
can't
language
just go out
is
and arrest
growing.
you. If there is an ordinance, and if you guys violated it, if there's no ordinance, there's nothing to violate. I mean, there could be something in general for disturbing the peace or whatever that, he could have potentially arrested you under that. And then we'd start the process of finding out what the courts are going to do on those. But I don't know what the guy's, all he's saying from the title of his memorandum is in support of arresting frauditors. So I was a little thing called due process that, presumably they can't just go around arresting people for.
This dude in chat is saying I need to go on the next bang bus. What's a bang bus? What am I missing?
So when we went out to Gallup, New Mexico, well, it's different whether you're talking about our bang bus or if you've been on Pornhub. So it's for one thing. So I'll talk about our bang bus rather than another kind. When we went to Gallup, the guys in Tucson, Pigs Under Pressure is his YouTube channel, and Tuck Police Suck. They rented an RV. They drove up through Phoenix and picked up the guys in Phoenix, and then we all met up in Gallup, New Mexico. We piled 15 to 20 people inside of this RV and drove up to the police station with 15 or 20 of us, some of us armed, some of us with cameras, some with rifles, and piled out of the RV. So we called that the bang bus.
That's awesome. But that's awesome.
If you Google bang bus, though, that's not what you're going to get. Kids under 18, please don't Google bang bus. Ask your parents for permission.
Cool. Yeah, no, James, you told me about that event that you guys were going to go do that, but I had like a big thing. We had Feed the Need. That's what it was. We had Feed the Need going on like the day before or the day after, and I couldn't make it down. So I apologize for missing it.
Well, I mean, you had a good reason to miss it. That's a powerful thing that you've done every single year for how many years now?
This was number 10.
And actually, that's another thing to talk about here. The government is absolutely out of control with all of these busybodies constantly making up new laws and codes and ordinances and now administrative orders where a city manager can just blot something down on a piece of paper and boom, now the police are going to violently attack you if you violate their writing. And so there are a few different approaches that people use. I personally choose the less violent approach, but there's been some really powerful things that have been done. For example, in Dallas, what was it, almost 10 years ago, Patrick? Wasn't it a church group that was arrested for feeding the homeless because there was an ordinance, right? There was an ordinance that said you could not feed so many people, right?
I believe it. Well, it's morphed over the years. It started, I think, at the state level. A church group actually got arrested and prosecuted, and I believe found guilty for feeding the homeless without a permission slip from the government, which to me is just an absolute egregious, obvious thing to point out that, hey, the government's kind of evil when it starts telling you can't feed homeless people.
But Patrick, they wrote it on paper, didn't they? They called it a statute, didn't they?
I mean, yeah, it was definitely paper.
So you should have obeyed.
So this church group didn't obey, and they got prosecuted for it. And this happened again recently in another state that I think we were talking to. I think you had told me something about this. I don't know what happened, but we were considering moving Feed the Need to another state because they had just arrested this little old lady for trying to feed people without a permission slip. But
yes.
And this wasn't my original idea. I wasn't there the first years of this. There's a group of people in Texas called Don't Comply. They were very involved in the Second Amendment and open carry movements in Texas. They protested the big open carry movement protest at the Alamo. That was all Don't Comply. Anyway, so this was their idea originally, and they've been running it every year for 10 years. They go out in Dallas every December and feed the homeless. And they do it very loudly and in the open. And they do it, and here's the kicker that's prevented them from getting arrested, is that all the people that go out there and do it are very heavily armed. And they do it to keep the police away while they do the thing that everybody should be able to do without begging the government for permission. And that's Feed the Need, and we do it every year.
I don't think that these people are just armed, because I've seen a lot of these so-called Second Amendment auditors who go out armed to see if the police will respect their right to. I could be totally wrong, but I think that there's a good handful of these people with the Don't Comply movement that will defend their rights. And I think that the police know who will be a little bitch and lay on the ground when they're told to give up their gun and who will not. And I think that that's why they stayed away. It wasn't just that there were that there were people there with the ability to defend themselves. I think that it was that they knew there were people there who will defend themselves.
Absolutely. And there definitely are and were and have been and will continue to be people there that will actually defend themselves if they try and get shut down. They've had the regulators come out, I forgot what the positioning government's called, but they've shown up and started asking to see licenses, and they are laughed off of the premises. And we continue. And I'm not going to lie, I am one of those bitches who will lay down. So, I'm not trying to say, I'm a tough guy, but there are some real legitimate people out there who, no, they're not going to put up with your shit. The government only speaks one language, and it's the language of force and violence and guns. And they really don't this is why I tell people protests are worse than useless. They let a bunch of people get out there in the street and work out all their anger and energy, thinking that they're sending a message and doing something good, while in reality, the government wants them to vent and to get rid of their energy so that they'll just go back to work and continue paying taxes. The government doesn't give a shit about these protests, honestly. And this, I mean, Zach, you're an ex-representative, right? Like if a big group of people protested something that you were about to vote for, would that have really had any bearing on which way you were going to vote? I wouldn't imagine you would even care.
Well, all the big protests are so politically, they're just partisan issues. Like, you got your abortion, and let's say there's a abortion bill that opens up abortion to up to birth or something along those lines, and then so you got all the pro-life groups going through the Capitol protesting, and then you've got the pro-choice people, and they're protesting on either side. I know how I'm going to vote on those issues. If there's a bill to restrict, like there's a bill that's been introduced for the upcoming session that restricts magazine capacity to 15 rounds. If I were still up there, I know how I'm going to vote on that. But there's going to be protests out there. There's going to be the gun grabbers out there. Oh, yeah, this is the best bill. It'll save children. I just walk right by them because it's absurd. And then the NRA is going to have their lobbyists all over the place. And then the gun rights groups are going to be all over the place on that. But no, you're right. Because generally speaking, 99% of the time, those protests only occur on the big hot button issues where everybody's split already and everybody knows how they're going to vote as soon as the bill is dropped. Yeah. And I say that they're worse than useless because it gets rid of that vital energy that people might have pent up that might prompt them to actually do something that might change something. Like take an action other than yelling at the government and begging master for change, to actually go and like at Feed the Need, for example, where they go out and they actually do the good thing that needs to be done in a way that they can't be stopped. Like that's how you change the world. You go out there and you do the good things. You don't beg for permission to do them.
That was what drove me crazy. Sorry, that was what drove me crazy about the scamdemic, is I had a lot of friends, and still do, nearby me out here in New Mexico, who were begging for permission to keep their businesses open and begging for permission to go shopping. And they're like, James, why won't you do this with us? And I said, because I just keep my business open. I don't ask anybody. I just go to the store. I don't ask anybody. And for me, it came to a point there where if you're going to take away my livelihood and my ability to feed my family, there is a line where I will stand up, where I will not lay down and let you. And really, it came to that point for a lot of people, I think, during the scamdemic, where you realize, no, we cannot beg for our right to acquire bread today. We must simply acquire it and fuck them.
The another good example that's more contemporary is there was a chick running a barbershop in Texas. This made national, international news, so you guys might have heard of it. Right as soon as the COVID tyranny began and stuff was getting shut down, this lady running a barbershop refused to shut it down. And there's this Jenkins judge in Texas, just an absolute pathetic, sycophantic tyrant motherfucker, let's just say.
How do you really feel about it?
I can't say on YouTube. But he signed some, holy magic spells. He casted some magic spells that a lot of people respected, and this one lady chose to ignore them. And the cops showed up at her premises and tried to shut her down. And some people from Don't Comply showed up out front of her establishment with guns to tell people to leave her alone and let her continue her business. Again, like, this is the lesson. You don't get freedom by asking and begging for it. You get freedom by fucking taking it. And taking it in a peaceful way that says, leave me alone. Sorry.
The crazy thing about that too is that Governor Abbott, after that incident, said, "Oh, well, I told you to shut down your businesses, but I didn't actually expect the police to force it at gunpoint. I didn't actually expect them to enforce it." He's the one who said, he essentially told the police, go shut down people's businesses, and then acted shocked that it happened. He really just didn't think that it would get this type of publicity, that somebody would actually stand up. And really, it's on all of them, though. And that's, I think a lot of police officers during that time came to realize, no, it is actually okay to question the legislation. If you were shutting down businesses, you certainly would have been a slave catcher, sir. You definitely would have been bringing slaves back to the plantation. I think it sparked a lot of thought, even in the enforcers, where they realized, maybe I should be responsible for my own actions, and maybe I'm just following orders and I was just told what to do isn't an excuse. The scamdemic was one of those points where people were being pushed to their livelihood and ability to feed themselves and their families being taken away. That is a dangerous, dangerous line to cross. And I wouldn't want to be the enforcer with the gun trying to do it. Even if I was a bad man and genuinely wanted to hurt people, that's a line where I would say, people will drop me over this.
I'm feeling void pilled again. Help me. Because it just reminded me of the barbershop story. So what the cops do, they're not stupid. They left the lady alone that day, and they, all the protectors went home, and they just came back the next day and arrested her, threw her in jail. She spent a month in jail and ended up taking a plea deal. That. Yeah, the rest of the story. It's right back to void pilling, man. She spent like a month in jail, I think, and ended up paying a fine and copping a deal. So you have to be vigilant. You can never let up, protecting people. Man,
Now, I don't think that we need to go to this extent to, at this point, to stand up for our right to record inside of a public building. But Zach, I think that this is a huge front on the so-called First Amendment auditor battle right now. I think this is one of the biggest fronts. Is all right. We've established in almost every circuit we can record from the sidewalk, and to me, why it is important to record government is because by documenting them, I personally have been able to show you how illegitimate a lot of what they do is. It just flat out plain is not legitimate. They're absolutely nothing more than a violent gang of thieves and thugs who are forcing their will on other people at gunpoint. And the ability to record that and have Master allow me to record it is how I'm able to expose it, which is why, and I think they realize that too, which is why I think they fight it so hard. The truth is, if they had nothing to hide, they wouldn't mind being recorded.
I'm surprised they haven't created more laws and statutes and regulations to stop you guys than they already have. It surprises me.
It's a game, though, of trying to keep the people convinced, though, that they are a legitimate authority. And I think that that's where a lot of it comes from. Hey, we'll allow you to do this. We'll allow you to record us because we want you to continue to feel that we're legitimate when we just flat out aren't. I think that a lot of times they don't push some issues because they know that it's just going too far. It'll expose them too much.
On that point, going back to what you were saying about protests, and it's just a way for the government to let people get that steam off their chest or whatever. Another thing, particularly at the legislature, when they have these protests, that's also a way for all the people in public office, particularly in the legislature, when it's at the Capitol during a legislative session, to pat themselves on the back and look at the public and go, "See, look how much we love free speech. We allow these protests. We're the good guys. We love the Constitution." It's. I just wanted to make that point after what Patrick was saying. But if you guys don't mind, if I change subject real quick, not completely, but we're talking about public forums, right? And what you're saying, I'm not. We are at a point where it's clear now that people have a right to exercise the First Amendment by filming police in the street while the police are doing their job. What I've seen, just since you and I met, is you guys taking that law and applying it to Village Hall. And what I've learned in or the City Hall or whatever, government buildings, and what I've seen, particularly the Sheets case, and digging a little bit further, that there is a public forum analysis. What kind of public forum is it on any particular case, and what are the surrounding facts there? But there's also another analysis that can be used inside of a courtroom, and that is not the free speech part of the First Amendment, but the free press part of the First Amendment. And what kind of rights do you have not to go in and, talk through scream profanities or use a bullhorn or anything like that, but what right do you have to go in for information gathering purposes under the free press part of the First Amendment? That's a different analysis than the free speech. But
yes.
So
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's just it's just what I want you guys in the audience to think about. Instead of just running in, yay, we can do it on the street, we can do it anywhere. You got to stop and think. First of all, analyze it from what kind of forum is it? What are you going to be doing in there? What does this city have any particular laws prohibiting what I'm planning on doing? But then you also analyze it from a free press. What right, if I had my state-sponsored media credentials in my hat and walked in with a camera and started filming, how much right do I, as a YouTuber, have to go in and do the exact same thing, information gathering for news purposes? Does that make sense?
I'm glad you brought up that point, because I think that may be the strongest point to fight the right to record inside of a public building on, is not so much free speech, but news and information gathering. Like I said, the reasons that before I ever heard of this so-called First Amendment auditing thing, I unfortunately am forced to do business with my government. They take my money at gunpoint. They call it taxation. And then I had to deal with them from time to time. So before I knew what this First Amendment auditing thing was, every single time that I dealt with my local government, I was recording when I went in. I had never heard of First Amendment auditing. It was just, to me, I know that these guys are lying sacks of crap, and I need to record. And I think taking it from that perspective, going in to get open records requests, you're going in to get information. A lot of times I'm getting information with the intent to disseminate it to the public. And I think it is important to be able to document that interaction for news purposes. I think that's a much stronger point to fight on, in my opinion, Zach. I'm glad you brought that up.
I think you'd fight on both points, but maybe you'd have better luck getting a decision in your favor from a court on the the free press clause.
And we've seen before too, when government has on recording specifically kicked out certain press. They've cherry picked which press they want to be allowed in and kicked the others out. I'm trying to think of a specific case. I can't think of off the top of my head, but and that's an absolute. Cases like that would probably be good to argue that you're kicking these YouTubers out or these First Amendment auditors, but you're allowing KVO8 in. You're clearly discriminating against specific people whose narratives you do or don't like.
Against size of camera.
Yes.
I'm a bit of a third wheel here. I don't really want to derail this conversation, because he's giving out good advice that the people watching need to hear about, like how to navigate this magic framework that exists inside of these buildings that so many of your audience will go into to record in. But like none of this has anything to do with like property ownership, moral philosophy, or rights, or the rights in question. Like, so I don't want to derail the conversation. I just don't have much to add to help in that regard.
No, let's derail it, Patrick, because the whole purpose of the whole purpose of having this three-way conversation was, all right, here's the legal perspective for the spells and all that crap, and then Patrick's philosophical perspective of, look, this is what's right and wrong, and fuck your spells.
Well, okay,
go at it.
You have to start with like, why is property? What is property? Why is property? Like, property is a concept. There are scarce resources in the world, resources that can't be used by more than one person. And so we come up with these agreements that we reciprocate between each other on who gets to use what when. And we come up with these agreements to keep the fighting in check. Because if you don't have reciprocal agreements on who gets to use scarce resources, you tend to have things like war and fights and murders, and you tend to devolve back into the state of nature that, by tooth and fang, the lion takes what he has the power to take. And so the opposite of that is making agreements with one another to live peaceably, to elevate ourselves out of the state of nature. And the most fundamental of those is property. And you start with things like self-ownership. I own me, you own you. We have just created out of nothing two concepts: property, your body is your property, my body is my property, and I own it, which means I have the exclusive right to control it, and you have the exclusive right to control your body. And neither of those things are anything more than concepts that live in our heads. And if you and I don't reciprocate, meaning if we don't agree on those concepts, then they really don't exist in practice. And we devolve right back down to the state of nature. Okay, so we have this concept of property that requires reciprocation. Then, like, sort of enter the commies. I'm oversimplifying, but like they will start to collectivize people. And they'll collectivize people into communities, into communes, into cities and municipalities and states and countries or whatever. And then they start trying to make these reciprocal agreements that are actually only, things that we hold in our heads function between groups of people that don't even all consent or don't even all hold the same ideas. And it just sort of devolves into this, commie milieu of nothingness. And the quintessential example of that is public property. And I take the hot take that public property is an invalid form of property, just like private property is an invalid form of property. Hot take, I know. There is only property. There all these little divisions and adjective hyphen property, that this is all just nonsense post hoc add-ons to say that you can use this property the way you want, but this property, no, we all get a say in how you use it. And I think that's when you get into all sorts of problems, like the tragedy of the commons and things like people wondering if they even can record a video inside of a courthouse. Like, this is all absurd. The other thing that I want to mention is there's 4 valid ways, and I'm basing my words on just the most common interpretations of property that most people agree on. There's 4 ways to acquire a piece of property. There is homesteading, which means you find a piece of property that's not owned and you usually like emborder it and declare it to be yours. That's kind of original homesteading. You can buy it from somebody else that had originally had rightful ownership of it. You can get it in tort. So if you had a tort claim against you, maybe somebody wronged you in some way, and as restitution, a piece of property is transferred to you. And then gifting is obvious. Gifting is also kind of like the contract one, but whatever. There's 4 ways. None of those 4 ways, I should say it like this. All 4 of those ways are invalidated when force, coercion, threats of any kind are involved. And so if I threaten you into getting you to sign over property of yours, that signing over is invalid. Title does not transfer when coercion is involved. That's the bumper sticker version of it. Every single piece of property the government, quote, owns was acquired through some form of coercion, either by straight up coercing, like pointing a gun at somebody to acquire it, pointing a gun at somebody to threaten them into signing it over to them, or using stolen resources to purchase it from somebody in a fraudulent way. And I'm pretty sure I can defend that statement. And if you can think of a type of public property that wasn't acquired through coercion, I haven't heard of it, and I would be happy to be proven wrong in that area, especially Zach, if you can think of something. But I can't think of a piece of property that the government rightfully owns, because everything it came to own or possess or control had coercion involved. And so that leads me to just simply say, look, public property just isn't a thing. It doesn't exist, because everybody that claims any of it has claimed right to it, claimed ownership to it through some sort of coercive means. So I just don't morally really recognize any of it. And so I just see, what I see as reality is you have a gang called the U.S. government or the municipality or the state governments or whatever. And these are like gangs. They're rival gangs. You got mafias, you got government gangs, you got cartels in Mexico, and they've claimed property, and on pain of violence, they will control it in the way that they see fit. And I see these courthouses are much like that, except that they've implemented this, whole system of magic spells to convince people that they're not arbitrarily lording over these properties through force. No, it's a democracy, and trust me, you have a say and you control it. We're just doing it on your behalf. Wink, wink. Mm-hmm. Please believe us.
Yep.
And so I have no faith that when you guys go into these courthouses that they will even give a shit about their set of magic spells, because I see all these spells as a red herring to fool people into thinking that they're actually in charge of what goes on there. And they obey them when they need to keep up the pretense, and then they ignore them when it's inconvenient to them. And so I guess that's my piece. I said it. Thanks for letting me get that out.
And thank you so much for adding that part, Patrick, because we are, Zach and I are sitting here talking about, okay, what are the rules and the rules in these places. But that's the whole point of why I said I like to record and document. When I get to document everything that's going on, and then Patrick gets to say what he just said, I think that we get to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this is all 100% bullshit. And that the reason that we have this so-called public property, and from my viewpoint and from what I can see, is because this gang of thugs and thieves took money from me. Okay. They call it taxation. I do not give it voluntarily. The only reason I give it or let them take it is because I do believe that they will come and either kill me or throw me in a cage if I don't give it. But they take this money and they say, but James, we are taking this money for your own good. We are creating this system that will serve you and everyone else. And that's what we're using it for. We're building these wonderful buildings and implementing judges and whatever the heck it is. I don't know, a roads department, a police department, let's say. We're taking your money, but James, we're creating a police department that will protect your liberty. Well, first off, you took my liberty, you took my property to begin with. So you fundamentally built this system of protecting rights by violating the frick out of my rights in the first place, taking something that wasn't yours without my consent. But the argument, I think, for them is, we're taking it without your consent, but you get a say. You get to have a say on whether or not this is a public forum, a limited public forum. You're supposed to have some say in it. And that's why I go on with getting into this stuff and trying to say, okay, well, you stole my money. You said you were going to serve me and do good things for me. And I'm telling you that I don't like what you're doing. It's a nonstop battle. It will never end. But that's, I suppose that is where the idea of public property came from. I stole all of your money and built a building and said it's all of ours. Of course, we're going to effing fight over it. Most of us didn't even consent to it existing in the effing first place. Of course, we're always going to argue and fight over it.
The last thing I'll say that came to mind just now was consents of the governed. And I was actually working on a video on this again recently, but the documents, the founding fathers say that, just governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. What they fail to mention, the big secret that they don't tell anybody, and they definitely don't want you to know, is that consent is an individual thing. Consent cannot be collectivized. Your consent is your agreement for something to happen. And it's just a thing inside your head. You either consent to something or you don't. It's not a spectrum. It's not a percentage of a vote. It is your personal consent. And if you consent to someone governing you, which is interesting, but okay, let's say that you do, you consent to being governed.
I did. There's even a signed contract. It's called a marriage license. Go on.
then you're not really being governed. You're just obeying your contractual agreements with other people. It's not really a government if it has your individual consent. And if it doesn't have your individual consent, then obviously there is no consent of the governed, and obviously it can have no just powers. And because consent is an individual thing and cannot be collectivized, then this whole argument that people throw out about will move if you don't like your government, just move to a different plantation if you don't like your government. That's not how consent works. Like, I own this property. I have a right to be here. And I also have a right to consent or disconsent or withdraw my consent if I'd already given it to a government. And stay right where I'm at and be left alone if I so choose. So, like, what I tell people is, like, look, if you think that your government derives its just powers from your consent, try revoking them and see what happens. Government will not give a shit that you have revoked your consent. It will continue controlling you just as it always has. That's the last. So I will get off my soapbox now. Thanks for letting me rant.
Patrick, that's why that's the whole purpose of you being here, right? We talk about the status spells, and we talk about the truth is, I think that I try to operate within reality. I understand that in my reality, these thugs don't have a right to violently control me, but the reality is they do violently control me. And so I'm trying to, while completely disagreeing with them morally and philosophically, basically try to get along in life while among these animals.
Mm.
And
yeah.
And until we come to a point, Patrick, I think where enough of us realize that is all that they are absolutely in no way whatsoever a legitimate authority, that they are nothing more than a mafia, bullying, intimidating, murdering, and stealing from all of us. Until enough people get to the point where they realize that, nothing will change. And Zach and I have talked about this before too, that some of us aren't looking for a violent takeover, and it wouldn't be necessary if enough people simply realize these guys are nothing but violent thugs and just stop consenting. The truth is that a lot of people, Patrick, I think are consent. Maybe they don't realize that they do have their power over themselves and that they can say no. But if enough of us just walked away and said, no, leave us the hell alone, I think it would have a lot more power than when just 2 or 3 or 4 of us say, stop bullying me, stop murdering my family, stop stealing from me.
I can't wait to have a conversation. I mean, we can do it now if y'all have time, or I can do another show later. I really would love to hear Zach's story, to see what he's been through. I ran for not governor of Texas 4 years ago, 6 years ago in the Libertarian Party. Wow. And that was a very limited exposure to politics. And I learned all I needed to know from that experience. But you've actually held office for years, and you fought against the system. At least what James tells me, you fought against some of the COVID tyrannies using the legal system, and then that gave you some important data about maybe some of the truths of how the system works or doesn't work. And I don't know if you guys have time. Say if you don't, but I'd love to hear your story.
Okay, yeah, I have time. So COVID started in late 19 and 2020. I'm just trying to remember. I was in Santa Fe during the session, and everything was still open. And if I recall, the session ended and I went back home. And then, it just started blowing up, and it was just ridiculous from the start, as you guys know, with the masks. And then the governor issues basically the shutdown order. And she did that pursuant to...
I hate to interrupt you, but I have to tell there's about less than 1/4 of my audience that thinks that the COVID tyranny was acceptable. Honestly, don't even bother telling me that it was okay in the chat. Just get the fuck out and don't ever come back. Go on, Zach. Go on.
So the governor,
Really? I haven't seen that. Are you serious?
I did a poll on my channel to find out who was okay with it. And this was about 2 years ago. This was kind of in the thick of it to find out who was okay with it. And I genuinely thought I was losing faith in humanity. I became extremely depressed. I know we're not going to go into that, but I took a poll. And yes, about 20, I thought it was going to be about half of my audience that was okay with this tyranny. It was about 25% that was okay with it.
Retarded?
And
so I know you're not retarded. But what are you, Down syndrome?
I didn't.
Sorry.
Yeah, about 25% of my audience thinks that it was okay for the government to terrorize the entire world. You all, that you 25%, just go fuck yourself, get out, don't come back. I wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire. Sorry,
right.
Go on, Zach. I'm going to mute my mic. This shit gets me fired up.
So let me talk about what my position was on it from a legal perspective. So the governor issued her shutdown orders pursuant to a state statute. I can't even remember what it is. The state law is called the Emergency Health Act or something along those lines. And that law was passed by the legislature back in the 1970s, signed by whoever the governor was back then. And it basically said that the governor can take whatever action she or he, it's a female now and it has been was during COVID, take whatever action is necessary to deal with the threat, whether it's a virus or some sort of nuclear bomb or whatever. It's written very generally in general terms, and then it lists I think it's literally A through Z, all the steps that the governor can take. And Z was pretty much, I'm paraphrasing, but anything that the governor thinks is necessary. And so that is the legislature who drafted that bill, made it into law. The governor signed it back in the 70s. And basically, it boils down to this. There is a concept that we were all taught early on in like junior high civics about the separation of powers. You guys remember, you're familiar with that concept, right? Constitution is written, there's the article about Congress, there's the article about the executive, there's the article about the legislative branch, the three branches. And remember, we were taught about checks and balances, right? When one branch acquires or attempts to acquire too much power, the other branches step in and say, whoa, you can't do that. In 1970, whatever it was, 1 or 3, the legislature basically said, if we have any sort of health emergency or whatever type of emergency, governor, please take care of us all, and we'll see you at the next session. To me, the appropriate thing, if the governor needed to shut down, then she should have shut down. Maybe. I mean, whatever. Let's say arguably, let's assume that there was something bad going on that required the governor to shut down the entire frickin' economy. What should have happened, rather than the legislature in the 70s saying you can do whatever you want for however you want, and just basically giving all of that legislative authority, the legislature should have called itself back into a special session and then decided as the legislative body of the state, how are we going to deal with this? Instead, it's one party control in New Mexico, and the governor is the king of the party, and nobody did a damn thing to check and balance. And that's where I just went, I've been lied to my entire life. This whole checks and balances, 3 branches, it doesn't exist. And so I represented some small businesses who, like the woman you guys were talking about, just said, no, we're not going to do this. And they got hammered. Criminal charges against them, civil penalties, $5,000 a day. And we sued. And the theory of our lawsuit was this is a violation of the separation of powers. So it goes to automatically, immediately. Well, we filed in district court. The governor goes over to the Supreme Court and says, we filed in a very conservative, we thought we'd get a better shake in the southeastern part of the state where we filed the lawsuit with a conservative judge. But the governor goes over and files a motion, and the Supreme Court takes over superintending control. And I was talking about the hierarchy of the courts and how the district court is the trial court. What we wanted to do, what needed to happen, is that we go and present all of the evidence to the judge. These are what the experts are saying is going on. Let the judge sift through the evidence and make a decision on it. Instead, the Supreme Court steps in, takes it out of the hands of the trial court where all the evidence is supposed to occur, gives us like a 30-minute hearing, and then obviously rules in favor of the governor. And so now you see the legislature in the 70s hand all of its power over to the governor. The governor 40 years later, 50 years later, takes it and runs with it. And then the last straw, the legislature did not exercise its checks and balances power by calling itself into special session to put a halt to it or to put the governor back in check. They lay down and just say, well, whatever, they'll let the governors. Well, she's the top dog. Supreme Court rules completely against us and in favor of the governor as well. And it just
and it's more data that this whole system is a red herring. Like it's just example after example after example. If there was any justice, then everything you did would have been wildly successful to the point that these people would have been barred from even attempting to do any of that again. And some of them might have even been caged for attempting it. Like, that's what a justice system that actually protects your rights would do to people that tried to infringe on your rights. It doesn't even attempt that stuff. I mean, sorry.
Well, Patrick, the Supreme Court did write a long opinion about why we were wrong.
Oh, so, good.
What do you...
Yeah.
Luke, help me take this mask off.
But you'll die.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh man, yeah, no. So like, what did that do? So what did that defeat do to your worldview? Your, I don't know, faith in the entire system. Like, where do you sit with that?
It wasn't just that decision, you know, but at that point you can see the writing on the wall when the Supreme Court comes in. I've never seen the Supreme Court, and I'm not a big litigator, but this was a case that needed to be tried. The evidence needed to be sorted through. There's a lot of science, you know, that's would be helpful to in a trial so that somebody can sift through it. And our attorneys on either side can call expert witnesses and, you know, cross-examine them on their science. But instead, the Supreme Court, on a motion by the governor's office to take superintendent control of the case, steps in and takes superintendent control of the case. There's no trial. There's no evidence presented. It's all done through oral argument, and that's the end of it. So what that did to me, it wasn't just that decision. It wasn't just that case or group of cases that were combined into one. It was the whole thing from the get-go. The media show, it was all just apparent to me. I mean, I just didn't believe the narrative. But it just day after day after day of being, you know, attempting to be scared into compliance. And the whole idea of wearing masks just freaked me out. You know, it was so Brave New World in 1984, and it was like all of that stuff coming into reality. And that's what scared me. It wasn't the virus. It wasn't people getting sick and dying. It was what the government and through its agencies, including the media, were trying to get us to do, and then watching people do it. I live in what is generally considered a conservative county, the southeastern part of New Mexico in general terms is, but then you see all this compliance, and it's just like unbelievable. And I'm not black-pilled. I mean, I don't want to dismantle the government. That watching that happen.
Not yet. We'll get you there.
No, it's not I'm black-pilled that more people didn't wake up than have, and that it seems to be that we have little agency to actually make good change in these areas at this point. It's more like I'm black-pilled in that I'm realizing that I need to also focus on just making sure that I'm ready and that my family's ready and that my resources are ready, because I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And I'm just kind of not looking forward to that. And I'm a little doomer about that right now. I'm not like realizing the truth and the reality of the superstition of authority and government, that is not a black pill thing. That's a very empowering thing. Like when I walk into a courthouse, I don't feel like I'm protected by any magic spells like First Amendments and stuff like that. I know that the situation is there are thugs around me that will do with me what they can get away with. And so I act accordingly. And that makes me safer than I think people that believe in these superstitions.
Yes.
I find that empowering.
If I understand the pill analogy, I think I'm more, if I understand right, I'm blue pilled in that I feel like it's like the veil was pulled down for me, and I see what the real story is after being,
that's the red one.
Raised.
That's the red one.
Is that the red one? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. These pills are confusing. Yeah.
Yeah. But black is just doom and gloom, right? And it sounds like you're not completely doom and gloom. You still is a
I'm feeling see, so for a long time I tried to wake people up, and I tried to spend a lot of time arguing and trying to change the needle. And I realized that I have been successful to a degree. There's a lot of people that did wake up, but when I say a lot of people, I'm talking like tiny little percentages of the population. And so we really just need to like form good communities, make good relationships with people, make sure that we're ready in case the world goes to shit, and weather it well. Be the rock in the middle of your community and not get blown away with whatever comes.
And Patrick, the good thing that came out of that, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
I was ranting and raving and kicking and screaming on Facebook throughout the time. And the good thing was that I was getting a lot of positive feedback because I was ranting and raving from a legal perspective, just like I talked to you guys about what the law actually says on it and what we've all been taught about three branches and checks and balances and all that stuff. And people wanted more. It was clear that people just, they don't teach that for a reason. And whenever people would, say, thank you, please tell us more, please explain more, that encouraged me a lot. And it made me realize that there are people that I'm not going to be able to, there's nothing I can do as an office holder to get this message out there. That was one of the reasons I had to leave to go do something else. And then for whatever reason, James calls me out of the blue, and I realized that all this movement and all you guys are out there doing this. And it's like, oh man, this is fantastic. I'm not alone.
Yeah, I see a lot of hope, and I'm seeing a lot of messages in chat. People are waking up. There is reason to be hopeful. I go through phases, and you caught me in a down moment. That's all it was, man. I go back and forth. James, I think, went through a dark phase a while back too. I don't know how you feeling now, James.
Same thing. I go back and forth. One of the darkest times I ever went through, though, was the scamdemic. I had spent years, and I've tried to keep my main YouTube channel, James Freeman, just a little bit shallow, or actually kind of a lot shallow, just so that I could basically bring in a huge, broad audience. And then my goal was kind of to send them to people like Patrick at Disenthrall, and people like Larkin Rose, and people who are going to talk about deeper philosophy. And so even though my content was a lot more shallow, I still had spent the last 4 or 5 years trying to teach people that government uses safety as an excuse to take your rights and violently control you. And then to see a huge portion of my audience that said, oh, thank you, James, for everything you do, turn around and say, well, James, it's about our safety. I was genuinely, absolutely furious. I became depressed to the point where it was bad. I was seeing nothing but doom and gloom. I spent at one point a few weeks, people were like, at that time, there was probably 6 months to a year where I didn't publish any content at all on my YouTube channel. And people are like, where did James go? And I'm sitting in the background, just depressed in my house going, well, fuck you all. How about that? That's where I went. This is what you want, people. This is what you want. You are begging for your government to violently control you. And after I spent all these years and you said, yeah, you're right, James, all of a sudden one little thing scares you and boom, it's all gone, all down the drain. So yes, I've been in very, very dark places because of, stuff like this. anyways.
But the good news right
And I
now
saw
is that
people-
people are seeing, they're, we're getting the reports out of the doctors that, the doctors that initially came out trusting the science and the studies on the vaccinations, they're coming out and reversing that opinion on in real time on Twitter, and they're not being banned this time because Elon is running things in an interesting way for right now. I think that might wake a lot of people up, because there's a lot of people that, got triple quad vaxxed and trusted the whole message. And now they're hearing that it might not have been as straightforward as they were led to believe it was. So hopefully it's almost like all we got to do it's like all we got to do to win is to just kind of quietly sit by, wait for the government to F up again, as they always will, and just be like, hey guys, they did it again. Look, they effed up again. Why do you keep trusting them?
That's the thing, though. Every time the government is effing up in the moment, it's in the moment. Like, I wasn't alive during the time of Vietnam. We all know that they completely effed up, right? But at the time, I mean, what gets me is that people have got to start realizing it while it's happening, instead of realizing it after it happened. Start recognizing it in the moment. Because I mean, everything, it seems to me that everything tyrannical that the government's ever done, 20 years down the road, when the documents become declassified, everybody goes, oh, well, we were flat out lied to. But you don't recognize it when it's right in front of your face. And when the official narrative isn't telling you that the government is wrong, that's when people need to start realizing it. When CNN and Fox and everybody isn't telling you that this is the way it is. But when you're actually recognizing, hey, they're trying to scare the shit out of me so they can take basic liberty, the liberty to provide for yourself, to work, to provide food and shelter for your family. That was literally taken from us. My business actually, even though I stayed open against their will, I was not an essential business. It came to a point where there were so many businesses closing that my business didn't have business. I lost my business during that. I'm effing furious to this day still.
Yeah, you're not the only one that I know lost their entire business. Yep.
And I don't know a damn. Never mind. Go on, Zach. I think you had something you wanted to say there.
Oh, I was just going to say that during that time, I saw people in my party that are like ambitious people that wanted to run for the seat that I occupied at the time, that were promoting the clot shot. And lots of people in my party, which I always thought was the limited government party, the party for the people, and then to watch these people that are in positions of influence to promote and to back up the governor, it was just very disheartening. So, and that kind of, I was going off of something that Patrick was talking about earlier, so I didn't really jibe with what you were saying, but I just wanted to get that in, that, that was another reason that I was just like, I haven't left the party, but I didn't want to, I couldn't be a part of it anymore.
I mean, you have to put your actions behind your principles, and a lot of times that's a really hard thing to do. Sometimes we walk away from a lot of opportunity and money behind our principles. So, I mean, that's what being a virtuous person is like, putting your actions behind the hard things. It's easy to go out in the street and yell that slavery is wrong. Like, everybody will be like, yeah, what are you doing? Shut up. Of course it's wrong. But, you walk out there and you start spitting some truth that people don't agree with yet. That's when it's a little bit harder to be virtuous. Putting your actions behind the hard things. That's where it's at. Cool, guys. Well, this has been a really fun chat. I've enjoyed it. James, I think we gotta,
Me too.
I think we gotta do these three-ways more often. This is the most fun I've ever had with 3 men at once.
I do love a three-way. Hey, on the main James Freeman channel, let us know in the comments what you think about these chats and discussions. I was talking to Zach earlier and saying, man, it would be kind of nice to do a once a week. I mean, I know that's actually a lot to commit to do a 1 hour show once a week. That is genuinely a lot to commit to, but I think it would be fun and possibly beneficial to the audience to sit and talk about different topics of liberty, and not just I've kept my channel shallow with, police are bad and okay, and that's about it. I would really like to talk about some deeper concepts of liberty on this channel. And let me know in the comment section, not the chat, but the comment section, what you think about that.
Some people are asking for my channel and Larkin Rose's channel. I'm happy to provide those. I won't do it in chat though, because that's spinning by faster than I've ever seen it. I'm not used to James's fucking insanely large audience. I can't even read. It's going by so fast. TheRoseChannel.com is where you can find a lot of Larkin's stuff. Disenthrall.me is where you can find all of my stuff and my channels. DISEN. Oh, it's right there on screen. Hold on. There you go. Disenthrall. That's the YouTube channel. That's all my channels. So Disenthrall is about philosophy, liberty, and actually effective activism, not protests and nonsense. That's what we do there. We talk a lot of ethics, a lot of like actual philosophy, not just like woo philosophy nonsense. And Anarchast is my other channel where we interview a bunch of really strong liberty-loving individuals. So that's what I do. I believe Zach has a website that he'd like to pimp, hatespeechbook.com, right?
That's correct. Go there. I'll send you an edited copy of the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals case of Irizarry. That's the one where the 10th Circuit ruled that in the 10th Circuit you can film police. So I've taken out a lot of the jargon and hopefully made it more accessible to non-lawyers. So I'll send you that, and hopefully you can start reading some case law and thinking about it a little bit deeper.
Cool. James.
HateSpeechBook.com.
HateSpeechBook.com. James, any last words? I'll wrap it up.
Just want to say thank you to both of you for doing this show with me. I think that there's a lot of different people are in different places, want to be able to fight from different angles using different perspectives, and I think that I like this setup of talking about both the spells and what do you call it? The magic spells as well as the philosophy, and I genuinely appreciate you guys doing this. A lot of people out there looking for knowledge, and I appreciate you helping.
I think it's a fun flavor. Like, we have a good time. We talk about the law, which is more practical and helpful for people. We talk about the philosophy, which I think helps people's hearts. And James, you just do your thing.
I'm smart ass that throws it all off the rails.
All right. That's too long. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out. I've had a blast. James, thanks for letting me see your audience real time. That's been crazy. Y'all are awesome. It's been really fun. I'm gonna go check your OnlyFans next. Zach, that was a pleasure. You're awesome.
Patrick, likewise. You too. Appreciate you guys.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take it easy.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.